All right, hey guys. Not sure if I'm live right now or not, but I'm here with a special guest today. We got FenderJaguar, who is a Deuces Cracked coach. You go by like FenderJaguar or Chris? What do you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Chris,
All right.
Fender, whatever. Chris is fine.
Chris Fender. Yeah, man, why don't you go ahead and just introduce yourself, kind of give people a little bit of background, and while he's doing that, just also if I could get the stream, anyone in the stream, to just double check the audio for his voice, my voice, make sure they're both up, and I'll check on the status of the streams while he's introducing himself.
Not too much interesting to say about me. I've just been playing online poker for a long time. I'm a coach over at Deuces Cracked. Was coached by that dude from the 2 months, 2 million show, Krantz. Before Black Friday, I played up to 510 on full tilt, got jacked for a bunch of loot, and now I just coach, and I'm going to be playing live instead of online, since that sucks for Americans. That's about it.
All right, nice, sounds good. All right, so let me. It looks like we're good on Twitch, so that's the key, because that's where everybody knows that we do this thing. And YouTube, not sure. I think one of the issues is I may need to like redesignate the stream on YouTube, so I may just cancel the whole YouTube thing. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and start. So what I did here, let me pull this off screen, is I went through my database and just put in some filters. And Chris, can you see it all right?
Yeah, it looks to be okay.
All right, sweet. So I put in some filters here and went through right now. You can kind of see my overall stuff here on the challenge. And one of the things that Chris and I were talking about before the show is, you notice like, I've got this tiny win rate here of like 2 big bets per 100. But I've paid like $60 in rake. So I'm almost paying like, not quite, but almost like 3 times as much in rake as I'm able to win. So I did an article on rake. I kind of broke it down and looked at the percentages we're paying at different levels. And based on that article, which is over on my website, it really looks like it's very, very difficult to squeeze out a decent win rate at like the lowest stakes. And Chris, you kind of confirmed that when we were talking that. Yeah, and you also kind of mentioned bots. Like, how does the rake and the bots like factor in at the micro stakes?
Well, I mean, most of the players are going to be generally weak at these stakes anyway. So, like, I mean, if you have bots just playing kind of straightforward poker, then they're probably at least break even or better, and they can probably play 100 hours a day or whatever. So, it's not a great spot. And the rate just, I mean, it's cool that you're trying to do the challenge or whatever and show people that you can rock it out and make, how much are you trying to make?
10,000.
10K from how much?
100.
100, right, yeah. I mean, you would probably, I mean, your end goal is to just show these people that you can get better at poker, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, well, I mean, you'd probably be better off spending your time playing a more relevant stake, because you're going to be, getting into more relevant situations, and you're not going to have to deal yourself with the time and effort to, kind of surpass all this rake at these stakes, because the rake, it will absolutely murder you at these stakes. I mean, look at this. Your win rate clip is being, like almost tripled by the rake, and it's just,
yeah,
that's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's sort of depressing. And the big thing is that Carbon stopped offering rake back, and their rewards program is kind of crappy for low stakes players. So that's definitely not not a great situation that we're in.
No, it's garbage.
So yeah, that's that. And I'm gonna go ahead and turn off the YouTube stream. Better luck next time on that. I think I need to actually get like the code and stuff uploaded, but we'll just go ahead and do the show on Twitch and push on. So anyway, what I do is I'm going to go in here to my date range, and the last 1,000 hands, I've been trying to play a little bit more aggressive. You'll see my VPIP is like 29, my or almost 30, 26. So a little bit more aggressive pre-flop, but that wasn't really my end goal, to be more aggressive pre-flop. My end goal was to take down more pots and make my red line look a little bit better, and think more about what I was doing. I was playing less tables, trying to think about every situation. And as you can see, I was somewhat successful. My red line actually was up. my showdown winnings suffered a little bit, which is kind of common, I think, when you're trying to work on your non-showdown stuff. And also, winning pots without showdown at micro stakes is probably more difficult than because people are looser in their calling stations. So trying to find the right opponents to bluff against and the right situations is difficult. And I'm not used to playing that way, as anybody who watches my videos know I'm mostly play straightforward kind of ABC poker. But always looking for ways to improve and stuff like that. So anyway, let's I guess get into some hands. And
plus, that's a pretty small sample there. That's just what, 500 hands, 900 hands, or something.
Yeah, it's about 1,000. So
yeah. So I mean, the real way we'll approach this is that you have pieces of information in poker that you're using to make decisions, and that information needs to be broken down to like its simplest form, basically. And it's basically like a recipe for success, if you will. So when you're playing at these smaller stakes games and everybody's kind of looser, you don't have as much fold equity, they're calling you down, then your red line isn't necessarily going to be great on certain tables. So I would say that it's better to kind of understand why your red line looks the way it does in general and kind of what affects that, and then to go ahead from there and be aware of what situations you need to be doing what, bluffing or giving up or whatever, because certain table dynamics will not allow you to take advantage of, having a winning red line or whatever. So just, really depends on the table dynamics.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. That's what I've been trying to do, is find the actual opponents that, because even at the low stakes, there's going to be guys that you can't bluff, just like guys that at the higher stakes that you can't bluff, and there's going to be guys that play tight passive, and so it's more about the actual opponent than the stake level. And that's one of the things that I think people ask, like, what are the differences? There are some common like differences among different levels, but I think one of the more important things is just learning the different player types. So I'm just kind of click through these, and I've got the stats updated, so they are up to the point I had them, and I'll get into any relevant stats as they come up. But the top line is VPIP, pre-flop raise, and then I go right to steal, fold to steal, and small blind versus big blind steal, which is something I just recently added in, so I don't even know if I had that, but and that's just, I put it in purple because if somebody is folding like almost all the time to your small blind open, it's one of those situations that can just be instantaneously profitable every time. So
yeah, anyway. I would say just caution here. You really don't need all these stats, especially if the people that you're trying to help out with poker are guys coming into it playing stakes like this up to 10 NL, 25 NL, whatever. Obviously stats are okay, and the first thing you should do is get the Hold'em manager or the poker tracker in their hands and explain to them what that does. I'm not sure if you've done that yet, but basically, learning how to play solid fundamental poker is going to be better for you than anything else. And when you're looking at all of these numbers in real time and you're playing a couple of tables, even if you're just playing 2 tables, it's going to be very confusing trying to figure out, all right, well, he's his folded double barrel on the second bet is 7.18, so that means I do what? You know what I mean? It's there's just too many options. They're not going to know what. It's going to be frustrating. So just give them the basics, like the VPIP, the PFR, 3-bet, fold to 3-bet, and teach people how to play fundamental, solid poker before anything else. So I would say just cut this stuff down a good bit.
Okay, yeah, and that's that's definitely something I used to pretty much advocate that myself, and then as I kept playing, there kept being more stuff that I was like, man, I kind of wish that was on my HUD, so sort of kept adding stuff, but yeah.
The problem is that when you have all these numbers up here and you're trying to base your decisions, especially later street decisions where the flop or the pot is bigger and your decisions have more of a weight on whether you're going to win or lose that hand. Right. Well, it's not just that, but the information that you're using, if you don't have a good sample size or if you're not using it correctly, then you could be making huge mistakes, in that situation. Not to mention that when you're looking at all these stats, you're not even playing poker anymore. You're just focusing on these numbers, and you're not even really focusing on the game flow. What are the opponents doing? What does this guy tend to do on certain board textures? I mean, you could have 2 guys with the exact same stats, and you could have completely different plays against them that would be correct because of the way that they either interact with you or the way that they play differently from the other guy. So you'll get better at poker faster if you just get better at thinking about the actual game itself and the way that things are kind of working at your specific table versus your specific opponents than you will looking at all these numbers and thinking, well, he barrels, this offense, so I can call with this hand and fold with this hand. You might get a few things right here and there, but overall, your game is going to suffer for it, I guarantee you, and it will take you a lot longer to get better than if you took a more simple approach to it.
All right, fair enough. So in that case, is this the type of layout you'd go with? Just the
simple.
The
sure.
flop raise, the post flop aggression, and then their 3-bet on the end here. I'm guessing is what this is.
I mean that's certainly a good start. One that I really like to have is cold calling range.
Okay.
That's one that I always use.
Yeah, and actually, it was interesting before we started. I was just going through a couple hands, and I actually looked at some cold calling ranges because I was trying to put their ranges into Poker Stove and figure out kind of what I was looking at, and that's exactly the stuff I was using was their their cold call range, because that is something that comes up a lot.
Yeah, it should come up in every single hand, and the reason why is because when you go through a poker hand, when you're talking about hand reading, it's basically a process of elimination based on the information that you have available to you. So it's like walking into a store and you're not sure what you're going to get. There's all these crazy aisles. Well, if you want cereal, that it's going to be in a certain aisle. So you eliminate the other aisles, you find the cereal aisle. And when you go in the cereal aisle, you might be looking for a sugary kid cereal to rot your teeth, or you might be looking for something with granola. You might be looking for that Grape Nuts special value deal. So it's like, once you get to the aisle you're looking for, then you can get to the type of cereal you're looking for, whatever else. I mean, that's a simple explanation, but that's how it equates to poker, is that you're just breaking down this information as you go. So it's like, once you know what their cold calling range is pre-flop, then you know what starting hands they have. So when you think about what hands they have when you're looking at a board texture, then you can say, well, I know that he doesn't have 2-4 offsuit in his range, so I'm not thinking about that hand when I'm looking at this and I'm planning out how to play this hand.
Yeah. Hold on. Let me go kick my dog's whining at the door. Let me kick her out, and then I'll be right back. Hold on.
All right, man.
All right. Sorry about that. Okay.
It's all good.
Go ahead and kick it back off here. So, all right, so let's go ahead. Now, all right, boom, boom, boom. All right, so my opening ranges are, I open pot from under the gun 3 times from middle position, 2.5x, and then I just min raise the button. And additionally to the mathematical kind of reasons that I've heard and think are reasonable, I also think this keeps you very, very engaged with the game. Like, if I have to every single time I make a bet recognize my position, it's just one more kind of mental check that I'm going through, making sure that I'm paying attention in the game, aware of my surroundings. Any objections to those betting sizes?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really think you need to go from like 3x in middle position to like 2.5 in the cutoff. The basics is 4x under the gun, pot is fine, whatever. The reason why you're raising more under the gun is because in general you're going to have a bit tighter of a range and you offer your opponents more implied odds. So when they're flatting you on the button for set mining, value, whatever, it's a little bit more expensive for them to do so. And if you can get any extra folds or tighten up their range, not only is it easier for you to read their hands, but it's harder for them to profit in that situation. So that's why you raise larger under the gun. In every other position except for the button, it's generally 3x as a standard. That's fine. When you get to the button, it should be a mixed strategy. So if you have 2 loose players in the blinds or someone you'd consider a fish, weaker player, whatever, then you're going to want to 3x it nearly every single time, and you're going to want to tighten up the bottom end of your range so that you're not playing complete trash in that spot. And if you've got like 1 tight player and 1 loose player, then you can kind of mix it up, usually 3xing in that situation, and just maybe I'll be a little bit looser than in the previous situation. But if you have 2 tighter players in the blinds, they're playing like 19-18, 15-13, whatever, then you should be min-raising nearly 100% of your buttons because these players are not adjusting to you. They're not calling you enough, not playing back at you enough out of position. And even if they 3-bet you, say, 3 times out of 10, you're still going to be showing a profit with the price that you're getting with your min-raise. So it's really difficult for someone to adjust comfortably to the way that you min raise a bunch of times. So it really just depends on the makeup of who's in the blinds, but I'm never really 2.5xing. I'm either it's a reason for me to 3x or it's a reason for me to min raise.
Okay, all right. So so then you pretty much just adjust your under the gun to 4x, and then your button raise, and the rest is all 3x.
Yep.
And I think that's okay, because one thing that is very, very different, I was thinking about this the other day about the cutoff versus the button, is that, you know, the button, you're min raising and you know you've got position. Whereas if I make a raise and somebody misinterprets this as weakness because they're not paying attention to the fact that I do this every time, they're going to be, and not only they're not necessarily incorrect, because I am giving them a better price and they do have position. So it's giving you know, the button better odds to you know, to call or make a play that he might not otherwise make if it was just a standard 3x raise. So that is kind of something I'd been considering lately. So all right, anyway, I don't think this hand's going to be too exciting necessarily. So so here, you know, thinking about 3-betting, you know, my initial thought is there's very few hands that my opponent can call with. And he's going to play very honestly. This is a player I've got 1.6 thousand hands on, very standard. Don't expect him to play back at me too often, and so I think it's a fine spot for a continuation bet. Plus, I have the jack. Any objections to that?
No, the only thing I would say is you know, it's not necessarily a good thing that you have 1.6k hands on this guy. It really just depends on the time frame and the value of those hands.
Yeah,
based on the interactions between you and everything. So, I mean, again, I mean, it's cool that you have that, but I don't think that means necessarily that you should not c-bet or c-bet this board. What it boils down to is that he's probably going to have a lot of one-pair hands. If he check raises you, you have an easy fold with just a jack of clubs here on this board, and it's a pretty easy spot to continuation bet.
Right. And I meant I've played a lot of hands with him, so I know that he plays relatively straightforward, and you know, most you know, flop situations, he's a relatively straightforward player. So anyway,
bet bigger.
What's that?
Bet bigger. Bet 20 cents.
Okay, so is that just your standard continuation bet, or do you base it? I generally base my continuation bet size on the actual board texture, and you know, how do you just always bet pretty much almost full pot, or?
Well, I mean, you say that you base it on board texture, so what does this board texture mean for you in relation to your hand and your bet size?
This board texture, I would say, is, you know, one where I don't expect to get played back at with hands that don't have just a very, very large amount of equity on me. Like, I don't expect him to raise with many worse hands here. Like, maybe, you know, the ace of clubs, but that doesn't make up a very big portion of his range. And so if he's raising or if he's calling, you know, I'm probably in pretty bad shape. So I think that I can get away with betting a little bit, you know, I don't need to bet as big here to get an honest reaction out of the opponent.
Well, I think you get called here by a ton of one-pair hands, and I do think you also get called by random club-only hands. If he's got something like queen-jack offsuit in his range pre-flop, he's certainly going to call you with a queen of clubs.
Right.
Certainly going to call you with a jack of clubs. I mean, you know, obviously you have it here, but just in general. So the way this hand's going to work is when you continuation bet here, if you get check raised, I'm assuming you're going to fold.
Right.
Yeah?
Yes.
So when you get check raised, there's not too much of a difference whether you bet 16 or whether you bet 20 cents. Like, you lose 4 cents some percentage of the time, but like you said, you know, this guy plays straightforwardly. He's probably not going to be bluffing you all that much, so it's not a concern. And when he does call here, you're very often going to be betting the turn. So in situations where you're going to be betting the turn, you need to be betting bigger in general. Any spot where I can continue my aggression on later streets, I'm usually making a bigger bet because I'm going to be able to barrel them with equity. I'm going to be able to use the board texture to my advantage. And if you know that your opponent has a wide enough range to contain one pair hands that are usually going to be kind of weak, fold later on, straight draws, the random flush draw, anytime that you're going to be able to continue your aggression, it makes it better for you, and you make more money by betting bigger on the flop. It gives you more flexibility. So if you want to make the turn, you know, a little bit smaller, whatever, that's up to you. You know, it's better to bet bigger on the flop and then decide to lower your turn bet than it is to bet smaller on the flop and then try to, you know, go from there. And just overall, the bottom line is that you're going to be barreling a fair amount of the time with a hand like this. You have 2 overcards, you've got the jack of clubs, there's tons of overcards, there's tons of the situations where you're going to be betting the turn in this hand, and in similar situations to this, you're going to be able to put this guy on a 1-pair hand a lot of the time. This board you can have 9x suited, pocket 8s, pocket 7s, 6x suited, 1 club with those pairs, like 8 of hearts, 8 of clubs, something like that. So it's a spot where he's going to have a lot of weaker hands that are just going to call this flop that you can make fold later. And if that's the case, you'd rather bet bigger on the flop and then use that leverage to make him fold later in a bigger pot. Okay. Not to mention when you have value hands that you just get more money.
Yeah, and that makes sense, and that may be something that I've been doing a little bit too much is, betting a little bit less when I don't have something, and betting a little bit more when I do have it, based off the fact that I don't think opponents are actually paying attention to that too much.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of think that's kind of old school thinking anyway. It's like, well, that's cool. I've got a little something, so I'm going to bet, or I don't, and then I'm going to make it smaller. But really, you should be thinking it more along the lines of, am I going to be barreling here? Am I going to be winning this pot without showdown? If so, I should be betting bigger. Am I going to be giving up a lot if I get called? If so, I should be betting smaller, or consider a delayed continuation bet, which is something that I like to use against weaker players, because generally, if you check back, they'll often just play straightforwardly on the turn, which means they'll check if they would have given up on the flop, and they'll bet if they would have called you on the flop. So you don't even have to put your flop bet in marginal spots like a board texture like this. I mean, let's say you don't have the jack of clubs here, you just have jack of hearts. You check back that flop, because obviously that's not a great board to see bet in that situation. So, I mean, it's not terrible, but it's not great, especially against like a very loose guy, a guy that tends to call some. So if he would reveal the strength of his hand on the turn and just bet when he would have called you on the flop, and then check when he would have just check folded, then you can just bet like half pot or a little bit bigger and take the pot down there. Whereas if you get called in that spot, it's also not a situation where you're going to be barreling a lot. So it's really more about how aggressive can I be in this hand? Am I going to get to showdown? Am I going to make them fold hands? How often am I barreling versus am I just taking one shot? And that's really what I'm going to use as the measurement, rather than how strong is my hand.
Okay, and yeah, that definitely all makes sense. So let's get on this. This hand should hopefully goes pretty well. All right, so I make my pot size raise. Now another quick question. This is just such a small detail, but when you I typically, when a player's missing, I was kind of counting back from the button to determine where it was, but I found that most people, if like let's say my normal open is like 4x, if I'm sitting in this position, I can make it 4x, and most people aren't going to recognize that I'm not really under the gun anymore, like positionally.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a huge concern. I generally just 3x in that spot.
Okay,
but it's okay if you pot it, or if you don't realize. I mean, sometimes you won't even realize the other guy's not there.
Right, and that's why like I'm kind of what I'll do is sometimes like in this spot, if I have like this is my under the gun open, but I'm making it here from middle position because I've got aces. So it's just I don't think it's something that anybody's ever going to pick up on. So it's I don't know. It's a way to get an extra 2 cents in there, I guess. Yeah, I think it's all right. So here, obviously, a pretty good flop for a continuation bet. He's got just a ton of hands in his range that I think he's going to call with. He's going to call with any king, any 10. He's got a bunch of gut shots, like pretty much, any queen makes a gut shot, so he's going to have just tons of queens in his range. What I thought before I actually went ahead and, let me see if this is the one I have pulled up. Yeah, I've got this put into Flopzilla, which I've only got the trial, so let me kind of pull up what I was thinking. I looked at his cold calling range, and it was like right around, where's cold call? Yeah, like 23%. I'm opening from early position though, so I gave him like a 21%-ish range, which probably looks kind of something like this, right? A bunch of suited aces and then just a bunch of broadways for a calling range, and then like pocket pairs. Mm-hmm. So at first look, I would think, oh, he's got a bunch of flush draws here. But if you actually think about it, most flush draws are aces, and I have the ace of diamonds. And, this is kind of a cool thing that using this tool helped me realize is every time I see 2 diamonds, it doesn't mean he has a bunch of flush draws. Because if we look at this range, which I think is pretty reasonable, and we look at, flush draws, the only pure flush draws he has are like 3. He has 3 combinations of flush draws. Because everything else, has a pair or better in it, or has a pair. You know, all the other things have a pair, and then the king of diamonds is gone, the ace of diamonds is gone, the nine of diamonds is gone, and that's a lot of the hands I think he would be calling with. So realistically, he's got tons of like gut shot and pair draws, which means I think that he's going to be calling a large percentage on this board.
This really just depends on your opponent. If you're playing against a high velocity reg who's going to be check raising you a high percentage of the time here and making your life miserable going forward, I think against that type of player, then you need to be checking back more often than not. If you're playing any kind of passive player, then betting is 100% in order. If you're playing against a type of reg who'll just check call with a hand like 10 jack here rather than check raise you, it's a nice spot to check raise with that type of a hand as a bluff, then yeah, sure. You know, consider this information before you make your play. But if you do get check raised here, just fold this hand.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Okay. So he ends up checking, and he, you know, appears to be somewhat passive. I don't have enough hands on him to really be able to tell anything other than the fact that he plays quite a few hands and he's at 4NL. So my general assumption is that, you know, most of these guys are relatively passive. I go ahead and bet 2/3. You're probably going to say that's too small again.
Yeah, I mean, I'm betting like 25 cents into 30 here. I'm betting as big as I possibly can.
All right.
I mean, let me just go over this real fast for your listeners here. When it comes to this bet sizing stuff, it really, really depends on what your opponent's calling range is. And when you're considering a bet size, it's a sliding scale. All right, it's not perfect. It's not just, oh, I bet 70% here. No. It depends on what your opponent's calling range is and what your plan is for the rest of the hand. So in spots, like I said earlier, when you're going to be barreling, then betting bigger makes more sense because you're going to be putting more bets in, putting more pressure on your opponents, winning those pots, taking more money down. Now, in this type of a situation, what's your opponent's calling range? Your opponent's calling range that you're targeting is basically one pair of hands that also have straight draws that are going to check call you and anything like that. Basically anything that you beat that's going to check call on this board. Do you think that you're buying him out if you bet 28 cents here?
No, probably not.
So think about that. Think about what you expect him to call with for the price that you're betting, and then think about on a sliding scale how much you would need to bet to get him to fold something. Okay, so if you bet 45 cents here, do you think he'd fold anything?
Yeah, he'd probably fold his nines. He'd probably fold like nines. I don't know if he folds tens there or not. If I overbet the pot, probably
okay.
Some of the time.
So some of the time. So I mean, I think that's a reasonable assessment. So I mean, look at that. If you make it a pot 0.5, he might call it a 10 like 30% of the time.
Right. Yeah, that's
right.
We're
just pulling numbers out of thin air, but still, I mean, look at that.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
And that's
so
it's like more than twice what I'm betting now.
Yeah, so your bet sizing really is sliding scale style.
Okay.
I mean, it really matters.
All right. So, and that's a really good way of thinking about it, and I like that. So, I do bet he calls. You know, once he calls, I essentially put him on the exact range of hands that I thought he was calling with, which is one pair. Draws. At the time I was playing, I'm sure that I was thinking he's got flush draws a fair amount of the time, because I didn't really make the connection that there aren't that many flush draws in his range until I analyzed it a little bit. So the 7 like literally hits nothing. If he already had a straight, he still has a straight. If he had a gut shot, the 7 doesn't do anything for him. So I think that is like a completely safe card. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's definitely a safe card. The one thing I'll say again about that, the bet sizing thing that I was talking about is let's take this from another perspective. So go back to the 20-cent bet on the flop.
Okay.
So in this situation, you're betting 20 cents. You've got aces, right? One thing that I tell my poker students is to flip-flop their hand and look at the situation. Because very often we're thinking emotionally about the hand that we have, and we're not being concerned with what the board texture is, what the other guy's range is, what the rest of the hand's going to play out like. So give yourself 4 or 5 of clubs, okay? We have 4 or 5 of clubs here, not aces.
Mm-hmm.
What bet sizing would you use to bluff here? You have to bluff. You have to bet with 4 or 5 of clubs. What's your bet size?
I mean, mine might be 20 cents, but I could see 20 cents or 25 cents, yeah. I mean, typically when I'm c-betting with air, I usually just bet like 2/3 pot because I'm trying to give myself good odds on it.
Okay, would you ever bluff here? Let's pretend you have a choice.
Probably no. No, I'm not really bluffing. Like, I don't think I'm going to c-bet like sevens here, or well, that's not a bluff because I've got showdown value, but probably I'm not pure bluffing. I might bet some draws, some strong draws.
That's true. So, I mean, that's a lot different than a hand like just like 4 or 5 of clubs or something.
Right.
So the point is that when you're in this situation, don't just think about the hand that you have. Think about the situation itself. If you have 4 or 5 of clubs, you'd be insane if you bet this flop. It smashes your opponent's range. He's never folding the flop. You'd have to overbet the pot to even get him to fold a 10 a portion of the time, and then you're never going to have any barreling equity at all with a hand like 4 or 5 of clubs. It would be a suicidal situation, which means it is a good spot to value bet in that case, and that's why making a bigger bet makes sense.
Okay. Because you're just not going to be bluffing that much. So if your opponent knows that you're not going to be bluffing a huge amount of the time, then he's either calling or folding. It's binary.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Boom, boom. We get a completely safe card on the turn. Our opponent checks to us again. Again, he's on the same range of hands. I'm simply going to bet here for value. And
yep,
we'll
bet
take
60 cents.
Okay. So I bet a little bit small, 52. And again, one thing I'll point out is what what Fender's talking about here with the fact that I've got so many hands that I can get value from. This bet would be like what, 75 cents if I had bet. This would be like a 70-cent bet had I bet more on the flop.
Yeah, I mean, put it this way, dude. If you pot it on the flop, he calls. It's 90 cents. You can literally bet 80 cents on the turn.
Right, and so and it may not seem like a huge difference, but when we're talking about win rates, I mean, this is like hundreds of hands worth of big blinds that you can add to your win rate. So it makes a huge difference in the long run.
It's monstrous. It's absolutely monstrous.
Okay, so he ends up flat calling. All right, and we get like the case. Safe card on the river, and the fact that he hasn't come alive yet. So at this point, I think it's important to analyze his range of check call, and we'll go ahead and throw in his check here. Now, if he leads out here, it's a little strange, but we're going to be calling like everything up to a pot size bet, I would say, if he led out here.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't make sense for him to lead out here with any made hand. Most of those hands that would take that line for value would be more likely to check raise the flop. And that's why I say that when you do get called here and you get that turn that's a blank, you can absolutely just be pounding the pot, because most of the time, if somebody has queen jack or set, they're going to definitely just be check raising in this spot with all those value hands, the kind of hands they check call, whether king queen, king jack, jack nine, jack, anything like that that's just a pair and a draw.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I completely agree with that. And so when he checks at this point, he is going to have a pair and a draw most of the time. Now, at this point, I've got his hand narrowed down to that, and I know that he's got, pretty much one pair and a draw. So I'm trying to optimize my bet size on the river, and I actually end up, I think, making a mistake here because I could just go ahead and pot it. I think at the time I was thinking maybe it'll look like I missed my draw. But my hand doesn't really look like too many draws, as much as it looks like made hands. His hand, looks more like a weak hand and a draw. So I don't know that this was the right thinking, but I was pretty much, I guess, part of it may have been trying to get more value out of the hand once I realized that he probably had one pair and I could get value.
Well, I disagree a little bit that your hand doesn't look like draws. I mean, there's a ton of hands that you can just be bluffing with here as well. So, like, the thing about this situation is that looking at it from both sides of the coin, on one hand, you can say, well, he's missed very little draws and he has a ton of pair draws. On the other hand, you have the ace of diamonds in your hand, and that's great for you as far as bluffing goes because he doesn't have any of those. So he's more likely to have pair draws than he is to have not flush draws, obviously. Right. But the point is that in a situation like this where all the draws miss, you have to realize that people will call you down more frequently in that situation because they sometimes realize that, hey, all of the draws missed. So if this guy just has a 10 jack, and he picked up his double gutter or whatever on the turn, he calls again, he gets to the river, he could very easily just put you on a flush draw and just be like, well, this isn't a great spot, but I'm going to call. he could have missed a flush draw. He could have missed a straight draw. So you're going to definitely not have as much fold equity as you think in this type of a situation. And first of all, the board texture did not change for top pair. So that's one important thing. When a guy has top pair, if the board texture gets scary, he's more likely to fold. In this situation, the board texture didn't get scary for top pair at all. Anything that beat him still beats him. Anything that he beat, same thing. Unless you turn pocket sevens, he beat it. So you're just going to get called by hands in this kind of a situation. You can miss draws, and their hands don't really change that much in strength on a 7 and deuce of spades run out. So I would bet right around $1.55 here. I'm not going to pot it. I think that's okay against some players who tend to call. Then definitely pot it or even overbet against fishy type guys. And that's part of the whole reason why. Okay, let's see the way this works. You bet 30 cents on the flop. He calls. It's 90 cents. You bet 80 cents on the turn. He calls. Right. Mm-hmm. So what is that 90, 80, 80, 160, 250, something like that?
Right.
So instead of betting $1.50 on this river or trying to pot $1.74, you could literally be betting $2.30 into $2.50. Right.
Right, and it's going to look less strong. That $2 bet would look less strong than this $1.74 bet.
Yeah, exactly. So let's think about that. The difference between betting 20 cents and 30 cents on the flop is literally a 75-cent difference on the river.
Right. Yeah, that 5 cents turns into 75 cents.
It's crazy.
Yeah. That's so that's definitely something I need to be doing more is just making my flops. And I mean, it's funny because I talk about stuff like that, but it looks like in this situation I didn't do it. Anyway, our opponent does let it go, which I think, maybe if I had bet 155, I don't know if that changes his calling range or not. I do think that when people see you pot the river, they immediately kind of think either missed value or, sometimes it's kind of bluffy, but either way, I do think that if he's going to fold, I still would have made more money by betting more earlier. So, but it looks like I did kind of think about his hand range pretty well in this hand, and it worked out all right. So I just need to work on my bet sizing a little bit.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, so here min raise the button. I know this guy is tight. This guy is pretty loose, but I only have 12 hands on him, and he's short. I don't know if I like raising here with this short stack.
I mean, I'm fine raising against a small blind in this situation, but it's the big blind that I'm worried about. I mean, this guy has less than $1, and how many hands do you have on him at this point? If you have the 12 hands or 11 or whatever, and he's playing that much, I'm just out of there, man. I'm bouncing. I'm just going to be folding this hand. He has too little.
Right, yeah.
Too loose. Too willing to just jam it in with anything.
Yeah, and I mean, so here's where I do the thing where it's this is the crazy driest board you can get. I can bet 9 cents, and he's just going to play completely honest. That's sort of...
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. And he ends up...
You can bet less than that, dude. You can bet 6 or 7 cents here.
Okay. And that's just purely based on, board texture, and, I don't know anything about the opponent, so... I mean, I guess I know a little bit. He's played a few hands, but...
yeah, I mean, go back to what we just talked about. In this situation, if you get called, you're never barreling, you're one and done, and it's a super dry board versus a guy playing, every hand in the deck.
Right,
I mean,
so that's why I want to bet less.
Right, yeah. It's the easiest one and done 6 to 7 cent bet ever.
Okay. Same thing, Queen 7 is a little bit light for... I don't know... I guess I was playing a little looser than I typically play, but it's a little loose. I do have, this guy in the small blind. This is not a good open. I don't like this at all. I've got this guy in the small blind that's got a little bit of a 3-bet habit. I'm guessing his 3-bets against button ranges are way higher than, average. Yeah, I mean. Hey, I got a quick question. Do you use Hold'em Manager or Poker Tracker?
Hold'em Manager.
When it says 3-bet, this is the position he bets 3-bets from, correct? Not verse. It's his percentage by position. Right. So in the small blind, he 3-bets 4.5%, and this is not a good sample size. I recognize that 200 hands isn't enough to get 3-bet by position at all.
I mean, it is 22 samples, so I mean it's at least something.
Right. Yeah, but it's worth it's going to get you closer than not having any idea. So anyway, I don't really like this open based on this guy being in the small blind and being aggressive. Let's see. We end up getting called by the guy that's playing 52. and we get a decent flop, and he checks to us. Now, me being like kind of like, again, having that, I think I would have like dominated poker like 6 years ago with my ABC style, which is just like straight up bet for value no matter what every time. But I think I ended up c-betting here, and I'm not really sure if it just seems like this would be a spot to check back. However, what I will say is that when I put like when we look at like a typical calling range, there are a ton of hands that he could theoretically call with. Like, he's got all that. Like, in this situation, he can have the ace of hearts. He can have the king of hearts. He can have eights, nines, tens, jacks maybe even. He only raises 2% of hands. So, I mean, he could have, like, you know, call with any pair. So, I mean, do you think there's enough hands that he calls with here to bet?
I would definitely just check back here. Okay. I mean, the breaking point is how often is this guy going to bet as a bluff on the turn versus how often can he pick up a little something to increase the strength of his hand and then start calling. I mean, this is a spot where you've absolutely got the board killed. There's only 2 sevens left in the deck, and a flush draw is really all you're hoping for, and it's very unlikely that you get all the money in by the river with this spot. So, I mean, you know, even if he has a queen, then you're probably stacking him regardless, because you're going to check back, he's going to bet the turn, you're going to raise, and then the money will go in at some point. So I would check back here because you're basically going to give him a chance to pick up a draw or a chance to bluff. Whereas if you think about the hands that call when you bet the flop for the most part, and think about whether or not all those hands would likely either bet the turn or check call a big bet on the turn. Because the hands that check call a bet on the flop, if they check the turn, then they're probably calling a big bet anyway. So, you know, you're not always getting 3 streets. You can still get 2 streets going from the turn to the river with a lot of those hands, like pocket eights and stuff. And they're really, like, if you check back and he bets the turn with a hard draw, like let's say he just has ace of hearts in his hand, you're going to raise that turn, and then you're either going to maybe induce bluffs, or he's going to call you with a super wide range. Plus, if he's the kind of guy who ends up being a bit aggressive and will bet when you do check back in this spot, then raising the turn's great, because he's going to have picked up draws that he has, he's going to have all the hands that he had anyway, all the pocket pairs like pocket eights he's going to probably bet. So I would really prefer to just check back here, and you know, basically we can make it a 3-street hand by raising on the turn. So like the worst thing that happens is if you check and then he checks the turn and it's a blank, like the deuce of spades. That's the worst possible scenario. And even in that scenario, you know, if you do get called on the turn, then you can just overbet or just bet big on the river, because his calling range is going to be such that it'll be relatively tight overall. So he'll probably have more along the lines of, you know, big hands like pocket nines. And if he's a fishy player and you check back the flop, he's probably going to call with those hands. So it's like you check back the turn to the turn. You still control the size of the pot if he bets, and that you put the flop bet that you missed in on the turn, and he probably has a wider range to call you with now. So I like checking back here. Okay.
Yeah, and that makes sense. And I mean, probably like feeling a little results oriented. I bet and he folds, but you know, at the time I was like, what, you know, I've got all the cards that make hands here. You know what? What, like, he doesn't have any. There's nothing left that he can really have when I've got the board crushed this hard. So yeah, that makes sense. And I think I was just sort of, especially against a guy that's so fishy. You know, he's. I don't need to play balanced against this guy. Like, I don't need to. I mean, this is
no, definitely not.
If I've got, you know, pretty much any other hand, this is a very, very easy board to c-bet, I think. You know, I'm going to be c-betting like, you know, 80 to 90% of my hands on this type of paired board, because it's so hard to have anything. So with that being said, like, on balance, yeah, maybe you should bet this, but against the 52, you don't need to. You don't need to play balanced.
Yeah, I mean, just a word on balance to begin with is you don't really need to be balancing that much at all. Making the best play will by far make you more money than anything that, you know, that you're considering as far as balance goes at these stakes. I mean, for you to have balance in your game, first of all, I'll separate that into a couple of different spots. There's generic balancing situations, and then there's unique. Unique balancing situations would be like, well, if I'm jamming as a bluff on the river, then I need to also jam second pair good kicker and have that in my range if their bluff catchers are worse. when in reality all you're looking at is the situation, what sort of hands you'll get called by, and then what sort of hands you should have in your value betting range in that spot that takes advantage. So if you're ahead, like let's say macro, you have a flush, you're ahead of sets. If they're going to call with sets, then you're going to jam your flush on the river. Same thing. If you have second pair nut kicker and they're calling down with third pair, or that's in their bluff catchers and they're very likely to call, then your second pair good kicker there might as well be that flush versus that set. Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah, but I mean at the same time, like that's against that specific guy. You're saying that, on a broad spectrum, if that guy will call there, it doesn't mean you need to do, it's I guess what you just explained sounds like you're playing balanced against an individual player, but not against the entire environment.
Well, I mean, what I'm saying is that right there has nothing to do with balance against a specific player. It's just what you think their bluff catchers are. If you think that his bluff catchers contain third pair, then you should be value betting second pair. That's a fundamental.
Right. Okay.
So the thing about balance is that when you want to take let's take a situation like you raise pre-flop with 10 jack and you're out of position and you flop a 10 to the guy on the button. Is that a better situation, or having ace jack, so you have the ace kicker versus the jack kicker? You flop a 10 rather, whatever. You have top pair and one kicker is an ace and one kicker is a jack. If you want to pot control in that situation, or if you want to induce bluffs, it's imperative that you use the jack kicker and not the ace kicker. Because the jack kicker has so many more combinations of hands that it is getting beat by versus a button flatting range, that is the spot where you can quote unquote balance your range of checking and folding by having some hands that are check calling that are pretty strong. So if you're going to have hands in your range there, having top pair no kicker is a lot better than having ace jack top pair top kicker, because that hand dominates so many other hands that they're flatting with that you just want to be pounding the money in at that point. So in situations where your hand is good, but it's not necessarily best, those are situations when you can quote-unquote balance. Now, as far as balance itself goes, it really just depends on the interactions that you have with your opponent. And not only that, but, we're talking about playing some micro stakes here, fundamentals are more important than that. Making the best play is more important than considering balance. I think balance is something that people get so concerned with. They're just like, I got to balance, I do it for balance. I'm betting this for balance. Everything, well, fuck balance. The hell with that. Make the best play. Learn your fundamentals. Learn good, solid poker. Learn when the hell to bet fold. And then just make the best play. If the best play is betting pot, and then jamming the river, even if it's 2x pot, if that's going to get the most money in against the fish, then do it. The hell with balance. You only need to balance against guys you're playing against all day, every day, that are seeing your lines, that are adjusting to you, that are interacting with you in a way that's trying to take advantage of what you're doing. You know what I mean? If you don't have those types of guys in your games, or you're just dominating them anyway, then there's no reason to balance. Everything has to be compared to something in poker. So if you have opponents, another common leak is that people give their opponents a thought process as if it were their own.
Right.
So they'll say, I think that this is the way he's going to play. Why do you think that? Usually it stems from because that's the way you think that this spot should be played. When in reality, this guy could play something completely different. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I have poker students come to me and they say, well, I don't think he's going to value bet this, or I think he's going to value bet this. And it's not just like a broad term. Like, I don't think he value bets a draw ace high board. Everybody pretty much does that. That's like a universal thing. It's not uncommon. But when you're talking about certain spots, like, well, I think he'll value bet, ace jack here, but he won't value bet king jack. I mean, that's a very specific opponent-based read, right? But you'll be surprised when people come up to this and they'll have like 10 hands on the guy or something and no reads, no history. And I'll say, why do you think that? What leads you to believe that he'll do this with one hand and not the other? And there's a big disconnect. So people just kind of grab these things out of the sky, like they're walking through aisles, like, yo, should I take this one? Yo, what about this one? There's just, well, you really need to just break it down to the real information that's in front of you, and you need to take a look at that. Not the information that you think is in front of you, and don't give people a thought process that isn't theirs. And if you don't have any reads on somebody, then you need to play more straightforwardly and gather that information, because otherwise you're making mistakes. I guarantee it.
Right. Yeah, and that's
kind of a tangent, but
no. I mean, like I think I've again, being able to express something or explain something is different than being able to like actually execute. It's I a lot of times talk about it when I talk about, you know, businesses and starting a business and stuff like that. You know, it's easy to have awesome ideas. Actually executing those awesome ideas is what actually takes skill. So
absolutely.
So anyway, so here, going back to our min raise on the button, we've got old white BFD, whatever, in the big blind. We want to be 3x in our 10s.
Definitely.
All right, so we've got the fucking Tasmanian Devil Tornado here in the small blind. We've got the loose passive whale in the big blind. We're 3xing the button here. So that's an obvious spot looking at it now. And you know what? Like I think again, that's a thing. Well, this is me. This is me thinking. Well, I can't raise more here because I want to get credit for every time I min raise the button. So I got to min raise it with my 10s. Well, the guy that's, you know, this guy and this guy, they're not paying attention to when I min raise and when I make it 3x. They're paying attention to what they have and how they feel. So
exactly. That guy's going to call with whatever he wants to play poker with, regardless of whether you make your bet a little bit bigger or a little bit smaller.
Right. So anyway, I think this is a good board to continuation bet when he checks. He's going to call with 9s. He's going to call with draws. He's going to call with clubs. A big part of his range is going to be like, you know, suited aces, like suited anything pretty much. And I think that I can actually get plenty of value here by betting out. He's going to call with hands. And additionally, there's a lot of bad cards that can come on the turn. Like any ace, king, or queen is kind of bad because he's going to be calling with a lot of those in the big blind.
Mm-hmm.
Concur?
I mean, this just goes back to what we were talking about. I mean, this guy's going to have tons of draws. He's the kind of player who's unlikely to check raise you unless he has the nuts. He's going to have a ton of 9x hands, gut shots, straight draws, and everything else. He might even have a hand like ace-4 that calls you. So just bet and bet big. Bet like 15 min.
Okay, so yeah, I bet 13. So now here, there's a lot of cards that I'm not going to feel comfortable getting. I'm probably not going to want to put like a ton of money in this pot over the next 2 streets, correct?
Well, I mean, on a blank turn, you're going to pump it again. But yeah, if the turn sucks, then we're going to probably take a free card or make a small half pot bet to get to showdown, basically. So
then you'd go ahead and bet big here, and then worry about pot control on the turn and river.
Absolutely.
Okay. And you know, he ends up folding. So again, these aren't specific hands that I necessarily thought I played right or wrong. This is for the viewers, but these are just hands that I filtered, and I'm just strictly looking at continuation bet situations where I have position right now. And then you know, Fender's teaching us all a lot of stuff here, so we'll see how far we get into this. And you know, also actually here, all right, well, so again, Queen 4
breathe,
here.
Man, breathe.
What's up? The Queen 4 here. We've got same opponents. This time, yeah, I think this is probably just a fold. Just give up on this one.
Yep.
Just chuck it. And then, you know, being that we do bet, I mean, I've got an open-ended straight, so I'm probably going to c-bet this.
Yep.
You know, we do. He ends up calling. Really bad turn card. That does not help us at all. So here, I'm thinking if he checks to me, I want to take the free card on the river.
Bigger flop bet. The feed's just a little bit back, but yeah, just check back. You're done. If you don't improve on the river, you're folding. If he checks, he'll fold, or check back rather. You're just done with this hand. If you don't improve.
Yep. So he ends up betting really small, and I think I end up folding. So that's fine. But yeah, bigger flop bet. All right. So here I've got a7. Again, min raise. I think the min raise is okay here against pretty much anyone. Would you say
just 3x? There's just no reason not to 3x it with a guy playing 36% of hands in the big blind.
Okay. So yeah, that's strong enough to go ahead and do that with. All right, so this is interesting. We ended up flopping top pair 7-2-2. He checks. I mean, I'm going to c-bet 100% here. Now, I guess here's a question. I'm going to c-bet obviously with my made hand. Now, am I c-betting? You know, if I've got like say ace 8 here, you know, do I want to c-bet there, or do I have enough showdown value that I want to check it back?
It just depends on the guy. Like, if this guy is going to float you a bunch and make your life miserable or check raise you a lot on a board like this, then you could probably just check back. But I would just bet as a default. I mean, you do win the pot a lot of the time, and he still you know, unless you know that he's floating you with like overcards and going nuts. I mean, you can still barrel on this board. People are still calling you with hands like 3s through 6s and 7x suited. So, I mean, you still have some barreling opportunities even with ace-8, I bet.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good point. There's so many cards that can come that I can barrel. Pretty much, I mean, I would, with ace-8, I would barrel, you know, any 8, any 10, well, maybe 8, jack, queen, king, ace, stuff like that. So.
Yeah, anything that makes one pair of hands worse.
Right. So that makes sense, and I think that's fine. King jack suited under the gun. This is something I've been opening lately. Again, it's going to depend on the opponents. I've got a relatively tight big blind, loose small blind, so the player that, you know, even though he's short, you know, I've got the real loose player on the button, but I don't know. I think king jack's fine here. And I do end up getting called by the fish in the small blind, which is nice. Hit the jack. So what's he do? He checks to us. You know, kind of similar to the last situation. There is an ace out there. He's got a lot of aces in his range. I would expect him to call with, I mean, initially this looks like a c-bet to me. I mean, this looks like a board I'm going to bet. I'm guessing I do bet. But I'm trying to think about what worse hands he calls. I'm going to go, I guess, you know, queen jack, 10 jack, 9 jack, you know, those types of hands. You know, 8, 9, I have no idea if that's in his range or not. It could be. I don't know if he would actually call with 8, 9. I kind of doubt. I mean, maybe he'll call one street. Hearts, and then a few flush draws like 9, 10, or straight draws like 9, 10. So I guess there's a lot of hands he calls with. And then the aces, I should be able to pot control because I have position against.
I mean, you don't even worry about the aces here, man. There's so many draws a player playing 33%. I mean, it depends also on his big blind flatting percentage, which is why I like to have the call open stat. But, I mean, if he's calling like a ton of, he might even be calling like 40% of the big blind or something. I mean, it's not uncommon to see, you know, a big percentage of you know, I'm defending my big blind, yo. So, I mean, you know, everything, again, it goes back to a comparison. So you wouldn't even be thinking about ace queen here. You'd just be value betting the shit out of it. You'd just be like, yep, eating my sandwich, value betting my ace queen. And it's pretty similar here. And the reason why you value bet ace queen is because he's going to call you with a ton of worse jacks. He's going to call you with a ton of draws. He's got a 9-10, lots of gut shots. He's probably not the type of guy who's check raising a bunch here. He could call you with 8x suited as well. And, you know, not too much is different for king jack because you're still ahead of all the jacks that aren't ace jack. And the only hand you have to worry about is some of those ace x hands that he's flatting with getting in the way. And, you know, really, if he 3-bets ace king, and he might 3-bet ace queen, or might flat ace queen, and then, you know, there's 2 jacks here, so it's not likely that he has ace jack. There's not many combos, only 6 of those. So, I mean, if he's not playing a bunch of smaller ace x hands out of position, especially offsuit, if he's only playing suited, then there's really not that many combinations of ace x hands here versus all of the other hands that he can have that are worse. So you just basically need to be betting like 27 on this flop and then betting every blank turn the same.
Okay. All right, so I think you know, I do these videos where I do like leak finder videos where I have subscribers submit videos and I go through and watch their play and look for leaks and stuff, and it kind of sounds like one of the ones that we've picked up on me today is value betting the flops, just not betting big enough on flops. I ended up betting, you know, 20 cents there.
Yeah, and it comes from you're not thinking about his range and the way that it interacts with the board in your range. You're just thinking like, I have second pair, you know, I should probably check it back. I'm worried about the ace, that kind of a thing. But if you really break down how many aces he has versus how many worse hands he has a ton of worse hands if he's any bit loose in the big blind, and your hand is easily value bettable.
Okay. All right. So here we go. We got a limp here from our fish, our 52 fish. I'm just potting it here, especially against the fish. I'm just going to pot it. I expect him to play like just absolutely. He's either calling or he's not. He's not going to care how much I raise. I end up actually, he ends up folding, and then I get called by the 28-24 that I've got 131 hands on. So we get to the flop. Actually, I think if you look at my stats, I'm playing 40-38. So I've been playing a little I think I'd been getting some hands, and I'd been trying to, be aggressive and whatnot, but I don't know how this happened. But I was playing pretty lag here. So I had quite an image at this table for being aggressive. So that's sort of the dynamic going into this, and this player and I had gotten into a few hands where like we'd seen each other being aggressive. So he checks to me, and I'm value betting, every time here. Probably you're going to say, 38 cents here?
I mean, you don't have to bet that big in this situation because it is a 3-bet pot. So
right,
I think your bet sizing is fine.
Okay, that's right. Yeah. Well, it's not a 3-bet, but it's the same size as a 3-bet pot.
Yeah. This is fine.
Okay. And he ends up raising me back like over 3 times my bet. So my initial thought is like, okay, whatever. He's got, he's raising a bunch of flops here. He can have overcards. He can have 7s, 8s, 9s. He flat called my, he didn't 3-bet me. So I don't really see like tons of like aces, kings, and queens in his range. I guess I'm mostly worried about like sets, 3s, 4s, and 6s. And, I just don't know how many, like, that's a very small number of combinations compared to 7s, 8s, 9s, and bluffs.
I mean, this really just boils down to how many bluffs this guy actually has in this spot. Remember, you've 3-bet a dude, and now you've continuation bet pretty big on this board. So, this isn't a situation where he's going to have a ton of bluffs in his hands if he's not crazy. He looks like he might be loose, but he doesn't necessarily look crazy. So if you don't have any history of knowing that this is a guy who's going to be check-raising you with overcards on this board, then you're really hoping that he just has some sort of a 5x airball. I mean, what hands could he be value betting here? 6s, 4s, 3s, every bigger pair. I mean, the under pairs, it's not even very likely that he takes a hand like 7s or 9s or something and check raises here. People don't usually start check raising pairs in this spot until they get to like 10s or jacks, if that. So I would say that, you can take some of those middling pairs out of his range and just give him sets and slow played over pairs more than anything else. And you're really just hoping, honestly, that he has some sort of a frequency full of like ace queens, and I would just fold in this spot.
Okay, yeah, wow. So yeah, I guess I again, and maybe this is one of those situations where I'm giving my opponents too much credit for recognizing how I'm playing. In that, like, I'm like, oh, well, I've been, I'm playing 40-38. This guy is gonna, he's going to be going crazy against me because I've been so aggressive. So I justify, I end up jamming back in, and he shows me 3s, which obviously, like, and the thing that's tough here is it's like, okay, well, I know that hand is in his range, but now I don't know, I have no idea what other hands could have been in his range there.
It's actually not difficult at all in this spot, man. I'll tell you, I'm going to eventually write something about all this stuff, but you just basically need to use shortcuts in your thought process here. So the first thing that you need to think about is what you expect to see. If you call here and you expect to have the best hand, what hand do you expect him to have? And that starts pre-flop. What types of hands will a guy like this, who probably likes to play a lot of hands, maybe not crazy, a little too loose, what kind of hands does he call with pre-flop? Out of those hands that call pre-flop, how do they interact with this board? What's he likely to do? Do people check raise pocket 8s here? Not really. Do people flat call and maybe check raise aces if they have them? Sure, that's possible. If he has king queen suited in his range, does he check raise this board?
Yeah, probably not.
Probably not.
Even aces. I mean, even aces aren't going to be check raising every time. They're. I mean, a large percent of the time, I think aces might call.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly possible. So the bottom line is, what do you expect to see when you call here? If you get the money in, what do you expect to see that's a worse hand? That's the first thing. What bluffing hands can he have? What bluffing hands, combination-wise, are in his range that could potentially be there for him to choose to bluff with? And then what makes sense for him to play the rest of his range? You know, how should he play the rest of his range on average? People do not really check raise pocket 8s here. They check call. So 7s through 9s are not going to be in his range for check raising. Mm-hmm. So you're basically going to see sets, the occasional slow played overpair as his value range, which obviously destroys the living shit out of you. Right. And then you're going to be hoping that he's going crazy with some sort of overcards that missed. So if you're, I mean, that's really what it boils down to. You're hoping he has overcards that missed, or you're absolutely destroyed. So in that spot, I'm folding.
All right, yeah, and obviously it's blatantly blatantly clear when it's explained that well, and I guess heat of the moment, thinking again, just thinking too much about the dynamics of the play and not enough about the actual facts, like we were talking about earlier. I can kind of relate that. The actual facts is that there's just not going to be that many times that, and honestly, it's almost more of a reason to think that if he thinks I'm crazy, like if you think a player is crazy, you're more likely to be like, I'm just going to, get it all in here. Like, I'm going to just try to make huge bets and get it all in. And so that's what, that's what he was doing against me, essentially, if he thinks I'm playing crazy. Yeah. So it kind of makes sense.
That's a big problem with people, who want to get better at poker, is that you need to define things. It's just, it really does depend on the actual information. You need to break it on down. What are you, refreshing here or something?
Yeah, for some reason the stream just dropped.
That's cool. I'm gonna have to bounce in a couple minutes anyway. I gotta get some grub and stuff.
All right, no problem. I appreciate you coming. Hey, let me. Okay, we're back up live.
Cool.
All right, so let's do one more hand, and then I'll let you just talk about your coaching services a little bit.
Cool.
All right, so we got eights. Obviously, going to isolate the 80-30. Let's see what we got here. He calls. Good situation so far. All right, so we got the king deuce king flop. It's going to be just a 100% value bet for me because, well, let me think about this one. Now, there's the first thing I'm thinking is I'm going to value bet this when I miss every time, or I'm going to c bet this almost every time when I miss because it's just hard for him to have a hand to call with. An 80-30 is going to call with probably any pocket pair here. And I've got, he limped, so like nines, he's raising 30% of hands. So you got to think his better pocket pairs would have been raising. That's the first thing I'm going to think. His pocket pairs, the beat eights, are raising. His his other smaller pairs are probably going to limp. That's fine. And then he's just going to have a bunch of other junk in his range, like just 83% of hands. Like he's got everything. So I mean, there's just based on the fact that he's got 83% of hands, like there's just so many hands that are going to call that are worse. And probably like 32 cents would be better here, maybe.
I just check back this flop.
Really? Okay, so that's way off from what I'm thinking.
I mean, he's got 83% of hands. I mean, if you open up Poker Stove or anything like that, and you check out how 83% of hands hits this flop, it's like occasionally he's got a smaller pair, sure. He's got every King X possible known to man. He's got deuces, and then he's got the random hands like ace deuce suited or whatever, ace deuce offsuit even. So like in this situation, if you check back, not only do you get to kind of control the pot on later streets, so if he checks, it's easy for you to bet. Say the turn's a 4, you can bet, get some value, whatever. But it's also very likely that a guy like this with so many hands that is going to basically brick this flop, he's going to be inclined to maybe bluff if he's any bit aggressive. So I would just check back here, call a turn bet, figure out the river, and if he checks a turn, bet the turn, figure out the river. So basically we're just going to play two-street poker in this situation and kind of go from there.
Okay, yeah, and that's what I did while Fender was talking about that is I pulled up exactly what he's talking about on Flopzilla, and we look at this flop. 60% of the time he has absolutely stone cold air. So
exactly,
60, and that's exactly what you just said is that most of the time he has absolutely nothing, and then 60% of the time he has nothing. That doesn't even include when he has ace high. All right, so another almost like 17 to 20% of the time he has like ace high. So I mean, we're talking 60, almost 80% of the time he's probably doesn't have anything he can call with. And so because you're thinking just because he has so much nothing, we can't get value. There's just too little to get value from.
Yeah, like against 83% of the hands on this board, your hand is actually strong because he's got so many hands that can't call in this situation. So, like, yeah, the turn is not going to be a perfect science. Like there's going to be overcards. You might not feel comfortable calling. I mean, these are the situations that you just have to realize. Like, if you check back here and the turn is, say, a 10, now he's got a ton of straight draws in his range as well. I mean, he might not bet a 10. He might check a 10. He might only be betting bluffs and King X or better on the turn along with all of his straight draws. So this really is a spot where checking back and then either calling a turn bet, betting most turns, and then playing a river is just the way that you're going to play this the most profitably.
Yeah, and that makes sense. He ends up folding. All right, guys. Well, Fender, thank you very much for coming. I think everyone's going to agree that we all learned more during a squeeze play show than we ever have. Now I know what it feels like. The guy that co-hosts with me, Shark Slayer, he's a little bit newer to poker, and I'm always like, correcting all his thought processes. So now I know what that feels like. And but it's good, so I'm excited. I'll tell you, I'm probably gonna rewatch this. So thank you for coming. And you want to just talk about like what your coaching services are? Just hit them up with that sweet unexceptional rounder discount you were talking. No, I'm just playing with you. But
yeah, sure, man. Basically, I'll do $40 an hour for anybody who wants coaching here. That's for you as well, since we go way back and stuff. So generally I coach for $80 an hour. Before poker died in the U.S., I was coaching for $200 an hour and had an endless supply of students. So, like I said, from everything that you've heard today, I can teach you how to get better at poker if you want. So, ball's in your court, whatever. You can contact me either through Deuces Cracked or through Eric here.
Yeah, that's awesome. Hey, and you guys, that's just an awesome deal you're getting. So if you guys want coaching, go ahead, hit up Fender or let me know, and I'll get in contact with him for you. So thank you for coming, and hopefully we can have you on again sometime. I apologize for some reason the stream hasn't been quite as lively as it once was, but we'll get there. We'll get there.
All good, man.
Plenty of people will see it on YouTube. So thanks for coming,
cool.
and have a good one. Good luck playing.
Yep. Have a good rest of your show, man.
Later. Right, take it easy. All right, guys. So I think we're all going to agree that was pretty awesome having a no kidding poker coach on here, and that is a kick-ass deal. So I promise you I'm going to be taking him up on that when I move up here. And based on the discussion that we had, I think I'm thinking very, very strongly about going ahead, moving over to one of the rakeback sites, and Juicy Stakes Poker, playing there and moving up to 10 NL, because if I know that I can beat these stakes, and I know that based on even just some of the stuff we just heard, there's plenty of leaks in my game as well. But I'm just kind of tired of battling the rake and watching so much money go to the poker site. So I may kind of cheat again on my challenge by just bumping up to 10 NL, but I don't know. We'll see. But let's go ahead and keep pressing, and we'll see if we can go through some of these hands on our own. I was hoping to have another guest on the show, but he is not, the most reliable person I know. So I can't say I'm terribly surprised, but that's okay. We'll we'll push on with the real deal crew. The coach's name was FenderJaguar. He's a Deuces Cracked coach. And, you can go ahead and, I forget exactly how he said to get in contact with him, but if you need his contact info, I can contact him for you, give him your email address or whatnot, and he can get a hold of you. But let's go ahead and keep going through a few hands. I've got about 45 minutes left in the show, so I'll try and keep it as good as possible without our professional coach here, which was an awesome treat. So again, I'm going to say, based on what we talked about, that I should be 3xing here on the button with my ace-10. We do get called here. I hit a 10, and in this situation, there's going to be a ton of hands that he can call with, right? Like he's going to have, he's going to have tons of diamonds. He'll even have the ace of diamonds sometimes here. So he has lots of diamonds. He has pairs. He's got 10 jack, queen 10, jack 10. All those hands are going to be calling this flop. So when he checks to us, I think I'm betting 100% of the time. And I think, again, I'll start making my bets a little bigger, more like, 14 cents, 16 cents, 15 cents. Probably 15 cents in here is a good amount, and that'll get more value in. So we get a turn. 7 I don't think is a great card, because, he's playing 50% of hands. He's going to have some 7s in his range. So I really don't think that's like a great card to be calling with, and or a great card for us. So we'll see how he reacts when he checks. He's going to be checking back some flush draws. He's going to be checking back his middle hands. 7, I don't know if he would check or bet out. It looks like I checked because maybe I was a little scared of the 7. I don't know if I agree with that. I think a lot of his range is going to be, 10s and other weak pairs that don't include a 7. Enough of them that I don't need to be checking back. So let's go ahead and we'll play with Flopzilla a little bit. And this is, this shows you how much you can get into just reviewing your hands. These are literally, I may rename this show to the continuation bet show because these are just continuation. This is the last 1,000 hands I pulled up. For those of you guys that are just checking in, I filtered the last 1,000 hands I've played. I put in the filters for continuation bets where I had position. These aren't even out of position continuation bets yet. So, I've got tons of stuff to go over, and going over this stuff really helps you out. So he's got 47%. We'll put in his cold calling range in the big blind. I don't have tons of hands. Well, it's 100%, so I don't think that's quite accurate, but we'll just say like 47%. He's just going to have a huge number of hands that he's cold calling with, so go ahead, scroll it back to, whatever. He's probably got like more like 50. He's going to call more. He's going to call wider in the big blind because he's like, oh, I'm getting good odds, defend my big blind, just like Fender was saying. Get rid of Jack 7 off. Actually, those actually are important hands whether or not he has. Yeah, this is sort of dumb. Whatever. We'll go ahead and put those in, and then the flop. I can't put in the Turner River because this is a free version. I'll probably pay for this. This is a good piece of software to use. I kind of like it. Some people can just sort of do this stuff. They just sort of understand the hands really well, and they will just be able to kind of like visualize this stuff in their head. I can't. So, I'm unexceptional rounder, not exceptional rounder. So I'm not, a math whiz. I'm not great at figuring this stuff out on my own. So stuff like this helps me a lot. And we've got the ace of spades and the 10 of clubs. And so now we see that, on that flop, he's got nothing like 60% of the time. And he's got, ace high like another 20% of the time. So even that king 7-10, he has like nothing a lot. Middle pair. What is this? Oh, whoops. This is that old flop. So again, this would be a great spot to check back with the king deuce flop. I don't know why I keep mixing these up. So we've got king 7. Somebody probably saw that in the stream, saw that I was entering it wrong. All right, this is a little better. I was like, man, maybe I shouldn't have been c-betting there. He didn't have any hands. So just using this tool lets me go through and see like, okay, maybe on the king, the king 2 king flop with pocket eights, there's so little he can call with I shouldn't bet. This one, let's see here. We've got, he's got top pair a fair amount, obviously. And then he's got a weak pair or ace high or no made hand a bunch. So, we see that he's got some flush draws, some open-ended straight draws, some gut shots. And just looking at this, you get an idea of, okay, he's got a large number of weak middle ace high flush draw open-ended gut shot. He's got a bunch of hands like that, so that's a bunch of hands that will call us with the turn not changing anything. Like if we kill another 7, like let's kill the 7 of clubs because we know that he doesn't have that. Like it's very, very hard. Let me see how often, if we kill the 7 of clubs, how often does he have that weak pair? The 7. Well, I want to see the 7 specifically. How do I do that? I want to look. Oh, I think I hover over. No, I don't know how to do that. Sorry. I'm sure there's a way to do it, but like, how many 7s does he have? 6, 6, 5. Yeah, he has a few. All right. So, but not as many as he would have like on the flop. So I don't think the 7 hurts us as much as I may have thought at the time, and I think I can probably bet again here for value. But I end up checking back because I'm like, well, now maybe there's not as many hands I can call. I think the turn I can go ahead and bet for value. He ends up betting out here on the river. Very, very typical here to this is a very easy call, and let me explain why. Obviously I have a decent hand, but there's straights that missed and there's flush draws that missed. and he ends up having like ace 2. So he called us on the flop with ace high. I mean, that's it. So that's like, I mean, I'll go ahead and take that note right here, just in case I ever run into this guy again. But you know, so when I take notes, you know, I'll go ahead and say like he called, you know, king 7 10. My phone just rang. Sorry, no. So king 7 2 double suited, DS for double suited, and then I'll just say, you know, called c-bet out of position with like ace 2 suited, no draw. All right, so he pretty much, you know, just saying he pretty much called with ace high, but I like to put in sort of the whole situation, that way I can, you know, that way I can actually like understand what's going on. So let's move on to the next thing, and we'll looks like there's some heads up hands. I don't really want to get too much into those. So all right, so here we've got tens, and we get the limp in the small blind, and we bump it up from the big blind, which seems pretty standard to me. We do get an overpair, so we flop our overpair. It checks again here. I mean, 9-2-9. He's playing 83% of hands. Like, it is hard for him to have anything, but I think that, I mean, if he calls with overcards, if he calls with, in this situation, our ranges are a lot looser. I bet pretty large. I think this bet sizing is okay. Maybe 26 cents, but I don't think it's too far off. 28 seems a little big, but I think this is okay. Maybe 28 would be better. He flat calls, so again, we can kind of put him on a range of like 9s. I would say like 9s and 8s, 7s, 6s, 5s, 4s. Pretty much any pair, any flush draw is going to be his range. The ace is not a great card. I mean, he did limp, but it certainly is a part of his range. I do think that, again, this may be one of those mistakes I make where yeah, so you must be playing on Bovada. The ace changes things, but it makes it kind of tough to get value from hands. At the same time, this may be a mistake I make where I say, well, to be balanced, I would bet this ace, and it looks like I chose not to, which I actually really like. I think checking back the ace is fine. Now, an ace on the river obviously makes it very, very hard for him to have an ace. So now I'm like, okay, well, it's really tough for him to have an ace. You know, we've checked back. The pot's small. It doesn't look like he has anything. I think I put him on some flush draws, stuff like that. Then he bets $1 into the 80-cent pot, so he overbets it. So now it's like, you know, I'll go with what Fender was saying about, okay, well, what makes sense here? Like, what makes sense for him to be doing this with? And I'm like, well, I mean, I guess like what I expect to see from somebody overbetting the river is an ace, a 2. I mean, like, that's really all I like, you know, like a full house here. So I'm pretty much like, well, the only value hands he can have are a full house. If he's bluffing, I mean, he's overbet bluffing. So I guess in this situation, how often is this guy bluffing over the pot without a set? You know, he doesn't do this with a 9, I don't think. So this may be a spot I can actually fold, even though there is no like there's just no you know, there's no hands that make sense in his range, right? Like, I can't put him on a hand here. I can't find a hand that makes sense for him to have played this way. Call the flop, like limp pre, call the raise, call the flop, you know, check the turn again, and then all of a sudden bet out. I guess it looks like he's making up for missed value, which could be a reason to fold. I ended up calling. He ended up showing, you know, pocket 9s. So he had just had me crush the entire hand. I kind of think I got away from this relatively cheap. At the time, I thought that. I guess I could have folded the river maybe. Let me know what you guys think of the river, but yeah, I think I could have maybe gotten away from it based on like what Fender just said when we were talking, but it was tough at the time for sure. So anyway, let's get on to the next one. I'm going to skip the heads up stuff because I don't think it's as relevant. This should be interesting. Again, we got a fish limping. I go ahead and raise. He calls. as fish often do. Decent flop, right? Like, not great. Let's go ahead and play around here with Flopzilla again, and just see kind of, so we can clarify our thinking a little bit. So he cold calls 24% overall, so that's probably pretty close to his range. Again, also I want to point out that these cold calling ranges aren't this isn't necessarily his exact card range. I think Flopzilla uses like what they consider, you know, typical ranges, and so that's what we're working with. But it's quick. It gets you, you know, a decent answer. It might not always be perfect, but it, you know, it gets you in the ballpark. So that's what we're going to use for now. So let's go ahead and look at how our hand does against this range, and what he has a lot of the time. So he is going to have top pair a fair amount. Okay, quite a few hands with top pair here. Middle pair, a good amount, you know, like 14%. So he's going to have middle or weak pair a bunch. He's going to have gut shots and open-ended straight draws a fair amount. He's going to have big hands, very small percentages. So to me, it looks like, you know, there's a bunch of hands he can call with. He's got a bunch of draws he can call with. I think it's a good value bet situation. Or okay, never mind. We don't have a made hand. Sorry. So in this case, maybe let me see here. You know, with there being so many made hands that can call, like he has nothing, only like 1 time in 5 with this range. Let's see here. So if we add up the weak pairs, which are like under pairs, I think, or let me see if those include, okay, 8, 7. So no, those include bottom pair. So, you know, pretty much he's only got a very small number of 7s through 2s, you know, 6, 5, stuff like that. So he's just not folding that often on this flop. And this is what I'm missing, I think, sometimes, is I look at this flop and I think like, okay, well, it's king high. Yeah, there's some draws. I can bet, you know, it's a decent spot to bet. I'll go ahead and bet out. But, you know, that's what I'm thinking. But when I look at it, it's like, okay, well, he missed this flop completely 1 time, less than 1 time in 5, you know, 16%, 16.5%. That's how often he missed. And not only that, but like, you know, a lot of that is like with hands that I had, you know, Queen 10. You know, there's just not too many combos. So I don't like this C-bet. I think he's got a piece of this board like all the time. He ends up calling. He checks again. At this point, I check back. I should be pretty much giving up. And then he ends up betting 65 cents. I'm not sure what's going on here. Okay, I ended up folding. So, and he just had the 9. Like he had 6-9 offsuit, which wasn't something we thought was in his range, right? Like 6-9 offsuit is down here. All right, that's over here. I didn't have that in his range. For that to be in his range, and this will be kind of interesting. Let's see like what they say it takes to put that hand in his range. And again, this isn't necessarily true, but 6-9 offsuit comes in, right there, 72% of hands. So can I actually can I actually get out of there? No, not really. But like, I'm not going to know he's playing that many hands. So, I think this is fine. Like, he could have folded there, but looking at the hand of range that I thought he would be on and that, made sense to me, I shouldn't have bet that flop. So, so you don't think EKW, you talking about the previous hand here? This ace-10 hand? When I called this river, you wouldn't have made this 15-cent call? Is that the one you're talking about? Because, I mean, if you look at the odds I'm getting, it says odds here, I'm getting almost 4-1. I only have to be correct like 1 in 5 times to break even on this call. So, like, if you think about it that way, do you think 1 in 4 times I've got a better hand? You're talking about The 229 ace board. Oh yeah, the one I shouldn't have called. Yeah, I agree. That's the one I don't think I should have called. So it's good that you couldn't have called there. Here I raise like we talked about. Fender said just go ahead and make these 3x. That's fine. It's easier. We hit top pair, which is always a good thing, and we get check 2 and we bet. So let's think about the C bet here, and just kind of think about what types of hands he's calling with real quick. His cold call range is about 22%. In the big blind, it's saying 50%. So, but that's only over 2 hands. So let's go like 25%. That's probably somewhat close. We can kind of make something up to at least give us an idea here. So, and let's go ahead and include Queen 9 just cause it's interesting that how relevant these like outlying hands become, right? Like if we tighten up a little bit and we don't have like all those, I mean that's a big difference, but those are the hands that make a difference. So a guy that's a guy that's playing 26% of hands, cold calling like 26 to 27%, has way more 9s than somebody who is only 18%. So you add like a few percentage points, all of a sudden they've got tons of 9s. So I think this is probably more accurate. And if we look at the board, which is 9, Jack, 6 of hearts, we can kind of see, and we have Jack, King of hearts. We'll see that he's got a bunch of stuff, right? Like he only has nothing like 20% of the time, and then he's got like ace high, weak pair, middle pair. So I think this is definitely a good value bet. Looking at that, he's got tons and tons of stuff that can call. So I think this is a fine value bet. And again, if I'm making it, I should probably make it a little bit bigger, maybe like 20 cents. So I like that one. I think that one went all right. And do you have the full version of No K? Yeah, it does. I don't have the full version, but yeah, that would be helpful, obviously. But no, I don't have it. All right, Ace King, boom, we raise it up. This is pretty straightforward. We hit our ace. Let's see what happens here. So this is kind of an interesting spot where we could consider checking back. Like what? Let's do this exercise again real quick, because I think this is really helpful. This has been very, very helpful for me. But again, let's look at his limp. I don't know what his limp range is. How often doesn't even say it. His VPIP is 36%. We'll assume he's probably not really folding too often when he's raised, but we'll give him maybe he's folding like a few percentage of his hands, something like that. And then the board is 2. Okay, yeah, I got it. 2, 4, ace. All right, so he's got like nothing, always almost. He's got actually a bunch of aces. Oh wait, hold on. Let me give us our ace king. King, ace. Now he's not gonna have. So this is that situation that Fender was talking about, I think, again, where he's got so many, like, look at his draws. He's got like very few flush draws. He's got a few gut shots. He's got, pocket pair below. He's just got very few decent hands. He's got a few like top pairs. So I mean, yes, we could get value here from top pair hands, like small aces. And there's a fair amount of those, but we could probably get 2 streets of value. If he's got an ace, we can almost get them all in by the river if we bet the turn and turn and river. So I end up c-betting here. I think I probably could have checked this back based on the fact that he has like nothing 60% of the time, and a hand he can call with maybe 20% of the time. So I think it's fair to maybe check that back because our hand's so strong. So next hand. Anyone thoughts on that that ace king hand? Oh, you know what? It definitely does. That's a good point, actually. I hadn't been doing that. It does, yeah. Oh, but the negative Negative slider only functions if you register. But yeah, that's a really good point. That tool is important because like he wouldn't have had aces there, right? Like he would have re-raised aces. He wouldn't have had like ace king there. So there's a bunch of hands that I need to be taking out of his range. So if we look at that, I mean, we can do it. Like I understand that it's probably better not to do it manually, but like, and this is gonna only help our point. Like he's raising 17% of hands, so he's gonna be opening like the top, right? Like he's gonna be, opening like a bunch of these, and so now he's missing even more. And now he's got an even weaker range. And so now we can probably be checking back even more. Yeah, so that's a, thank you for pointing that out, EKW. You're always there to point out the stuff I'm doing wrong. Appreciate that. So, I mean, Relo doesn't like the check back. Like EKW, Wanley, what do you guys think? Well, think about it though. The draw, there's a draw, right? There's like a flush draw. I mean, yeah, he could have like there's not that many 3-2s in any kind of range he has. Like he doesn't have, what makes a straight here? 3-5. Like 3-5 suited and 3-5 offsuit are like way over here. 4-5, 4-3. Those are a few combos. Those are very few combos. Gut shot plus pair. I mean, in this range. Okay, yeah, he's got the ace-5, I guess, the ace-3. Maybe he's got some of these in there. Like maybe he's got some of these, but I don't know if he has like ace-2 or ace-3 or ace-4. He could, but I don't. Here's what I'll say: I don't think betting can be that bad. But I think in light of how many hands, so think about like the majority of his range is this chunk right here. Like this chunk right here makes a ton of hands. So let's say we get like a queen on the turn, or a jack on the turn, or a 10 on the turn, or a 9 on the turn. All those turn cards now he can call with. Like there's a ton of turns that are going to like make worse hands able to call one street now. So I think that it's possible that checking could be better. And there aren't too many terrible cards that can come against our range. If you look at this little hotness thing, again, it only shows me like the top, but any face cards aren't really that bad for us. Like, what's bad for us? Like a club. Like clubs are bad, but every other face card is okay for us. The 10 of diamonds for some reason, I guess, drops it a little bit, but everything else is really good for us. So any face cards are fine, and those are going to give him like some sort of hand he can call with a lot. So I don't think betting's terrible. I'm not going to say like, oh yeah, you should never bet here, but I think that you could maybe make a little bit more money by checking this flop occasionally. And it adds a little bit of deception to your range, which isn't a terrible thing. So anyway, I'm going to move on. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if he calls as wide as you guys might think. Like I don't have that many hands on him, but all right, I'm gonna move on. Damn, I'm hungry. I need to get some food here. We got 20 minutes left. Let's try to get through the c-bet boards. I apologize, guys. I wanted to do more. Yes, this is live. I'm answering that question in the chat. If you're watching this on YouTube, it's not live. It's a YouTube video, but you already know that. So this is live right now. Force of will. So what? Sorry, what I was saying. Boom, boom, boom. Yeah, I'm sorry. I wish we could have gotten to some more situations, but I think I'm going to start doing this more. I know that like a lot of people like the entertainment of big pots going around and all that, and I'll do that occasionally, but this is way more valuable both for me and both for the guys that are playing, trying to get better. So I think that I think I'm going to do this a lot more because I like it. It's beneficial, and I hope you guys enjoy it too. So let me go back here. All right. Okay, pre-flop. Boom, we raise it 3x. We get called in the small blind by a guy who we've got a fair number of hands on. He's playing 22-3, a little strange, but man, I gotta say, I do like having this nice clean HUD. I know I've advocated having like a small HUD and not using a lot of stats before, but for some reason I didn't practice as I preached, and maybe it got me in trouble a little bit. All right, so here, I mean, blatantly obvious c-bet, right? There's just tons and tons of stuff that he can call with. So here, I would think that in light of what we know now, maybe 22 cents is the right size. I make it 18, so it seems like I'm betting like one big blind too small most of the time, is what I'm going to say. And he folds, which is fine, but I think that was very straightforward. This should be interesting. This looks like a hand that I might have screwed up. 3 ways, check, check. I'm not sure why I bet this. This is a bad c-bet. Oh, I reviewed this hand already, actually. This is terrible. This is bad. I ended up double barreling this queen, which makes absolutely no sense. The board didn't change at all. If he called the flop, he's calling the turn. Another flush draw came out. He checks here. Please tell me I don't bluff. Okay. He ended up calling me with pocket nines, which just goes to show that that queen is a good card for pocket nines. I think I might have been a little bit tilted or playing bad there, because that's. I mean, I had to know at the time that that was bad. All right. We've got the Jack 10. Here we've got tight players. So here is a good spot, I think, to do the min raise, because we've got players who are probably playing very straightforward in the blinds. Okay, decent flop. Boom, boom. Oh, I remember this one. Okay, so yeah, I think we can bet here because there's going to be a bunch of aces in his range. Like a lot of his calling range. Like if we look at his calling range, and then I'll try to take out his 3-bet range. He's 3-betting 4.4%. So let me show you guys how to do this. If you've got, and I only get this free version for a few days, and then I probably am going to buy it. But if we look at like 4.4%. It's probably even more hands than that, but we know that he's probably 3-betting something like these hands. So when we go to his cold call range, and some of this is just sort of a demo of the software, and some of it's just so we can actually get some good answers here. Cold call, he's cold calling in the big blind like 14%, so pretty tight actually. Like that's right. I mean, that's not a very big range. It's going to be like something like this, although. Probably a little bit like this is probably the top of his range, right? You guys know where I'm going with this. See, maybe it's something like this, and then we take out something like this, right? Maybe even this. Like again, this isn't perfect, not exact science, but this is kind of what we're looking at here. So he's gonna have top pair like 15% of the time, which isn't a whole lot. And he's going to have nothing 54% of the time, and then, a couple like gut shots, stuff like that. So there are some gut shots, there are some other hands, but I mean, this could also be like a spot to maybe check back once in a while. What do you guys think of a check back on this flop, based on the fact that now we see he doesn't connect with this board very often? The 10s have to be somewhat scary. So, do you think, here's a question. Do you think ace-jack suited, we've got ace-jack in his range, do you think ace-jack will call 3 streets here? Like if I go bet, 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 is ace-jack going to call? If ace-jack won't call, and I have a jack, so maybe, and I have a 10, so like, it's even less likely that he has those, but are those hands going to call? Are jacks going to call? If I go and I have a jack and a 10, so it's hard for him to have a lot of those hands that might call 1 or 2 streets. So I think that there are very few boards he connects with, and like, really, you think a check back is like terrible here? I mean, I think that okay. First of all, I did bet. All right, so I went ahead and bet. I'm just questioning whether or not sometimes a check back might be good, and I understand that just because he doesn't hit a lot isn't necessarily a full reason not to, but like how many hands can I actually get value from here? Now, like I will say, like a lot of the hands that like if they hit now, like if we hit a king or something on the turn, that's not a great card because now there's like straights that just connected. So we are getting values from top pair, we are getting value from aces. There's just not a ton of them in his range. So I guess the problem is a lot of cards that come on the turn actually, are kind of bad for us. So, We'll see what happens. He calls. 4 is obviously a very safe card. Let me see what people are saying. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it can definitely look bluffy, and I mean, I'm gonna bet that 100% of the time when I miss. So those are decent reasons to bet. Now he leads out the turn, which is kind of strange, right? You know, you got to think maybe he's trying to get value for something, or he's trying to slow me down. Like if he has like ace 9 here, he might bet because he doesn't want to. He doesn't want to call bet. So I think this is sort of a. He's leading out to slow me down. I don't remember what I did, but he bet 35 cents. That's probably about what I would have bet. I think I should be betting, 35, 38, something like that. So I don't think that it's hard to like raise here, right? Like he doesn't call with too many worse hands. There's not enough draws. So it's very hard to think of a worse hand that calls if I raise here. I'm not sure. And so I did. I just called. So I don't think that, I don't think that if I raise here, I don't think he can call me with much worse. And so I did end up just calling. It's about the same size bet I would have made, so the actual pot size isn't affected that much. We get another 4 on the river, which obviously a good card now. I mean, I don't think it really changed much, but it looks like we've got the best hand. He may, now there's all sorts of stuff he can call with any ace because it's a chop, right? Like any ace chops with any other ace, so I think there's tons of value. He ends up betting out like 96 cents, which, I mean, I think like a lot of hands could maybe do this. I guess it looks like an ace mostly. I mean, I think he's got an ace a lot here. So I put him on an ace, and I think, well, maybe like I think I make like a min raise, doubled his bet as sort of like a bluffy thing. I mean, the only hand that beats me here is like pocket aces and pocket 4s. That's all I get beat by. So there's like nothing that beats me. And he ends up calling. He has 10-8. So it's sort of, it's kind of a moot point, but it's regardless. So. All right, next hand here, and okay, boom, boom, boom. So we go ahead and isolate with Queen 6 suited against the fish. I think that's fine. He calls. We get the King 7 deuce, which is like the prototypical driest board in the world. So I think regardless here, we're gonna c-bet. I think this looks like a little bit of a smaller bet because some more money went in pre, so the pot's a little bit bigger. Bet 25 cents. I think that's okay on this board. It's so dry. There's very few cards I can barrel, and there's very few cards that are going to improve my hand. So I'm not going to want to put a lot of money in this pot after. So I think betting a little bit smaller is okay. And it works out fine. All right, Queen 3. Whoa. A little aggressive. Probably don't need to be opening Queen 3. But we've got a fish that has posted and he checks, so I guess I see the dead money and I go after it. And boom, boom, boom. He calls. We get the big blind calling, who's 49-20, and not quite as dry, but relatively dry board. So. Probably going to go ahead and continuation bet this one also. Even though there's a lot of hands that can call, probably going to bet once and then be done with this one. So yeah, bet like 3/4. It looks like, wow, 3/4. Maybe that's 2/3 including the rake. I'm not sure. So I bet and he calls. I probably didn't need to bet that big on this one. Probably could have bet quite a bit, like 25, 24. Maybe even like half pot would have been enough on this one. Boom, boom. All right. And all right, last hand, and then I'm going to probably wrap it up. Let's see, pocket 6s. Go ahead and open. I'll make this 3x from now on, I think. We get a couple calls, which is nice, and then we flop a big overpair, and it checks to us. So, I mean, here, like, part of why I want to bet is to protect my hand. You know, any overcard's going to be bad for me. Any overcards can call. You know, a lot of hands can call here. So these guys are relatively tight. I kind of just want to protect my hand. I think, I don't know. I don't know if checking back here is ever good. I don't think I wouldn't check back a lot, but I don't know if it's terrible or not. I would just normally bet here to try and, you know, take it down, try and protect my hand, prevent overcards from falling that make it hard for me to call. And I do get one call here. I get the 4. So now I have like the overpair and the gut shot, which is kind of interesting. He ends up checking. I don't remember what I do here. I think a check back here is probably in order. I go ahead and bet. You guys let me know what you think of that. But let's see here. I don't know if I like this bet. I guess there's so many. Here's the thing: is there's so many cards he can call with on the flop, like floating me, that when the 4 hits, it's like that's not a big part of his range, right? Like the 4s aren't a huge part of his range, so it's a pretty safe card to double barrel for my range. If he's got overcards, I still don't want him to see a river and suck out on me, and I think, you know, he's going to fold a lot of turns. Even though I've got the best hand, I don't think better hands are going to fold. Like I'm not trying to get better hands to fold here, and I don't think worse hands are going to call too often, but I do want to avoid seeing like a river. And he ends up folding, which probably means he just called with overcards, and that's exactly what happened. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up for the show today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I mean, that was pretty awesome having like a professional, you know, poker player on to talk to us a little bit. It certainly helped me out, benefited me. I was actually just kind of joking around with Fender when I mentioned the discount. I was thinking like he usually charges 80. Maybe I could, you know, get you guys a deal where he'll charge you, you know, $75 an hour for like as a special like intro lesson. That's what I was I was kind of hoping for something like that. I had no idea he was gonna throw out, you know, a $40 an offer, a $40 an hour offer. That's pretty incredible. So definitely, if you guys are interested in coaching, or if you're playing like, you know, 25 NL, or even if like you're playing like, you know, 5 NL or 10 NL, it might be worth it just to do one thing where he goes through and talks through stuff like that with you guys. So you know, yeah, he was on the show earlier for us. If you guys got to the show late and you didn't catch you know, Fender talking to us, he I mean, talked about all sorts of stuff. So check out the replay. It's going to be on YouTube. I'm going to go ahead and end the show. I'm going to try to get the replay up on YouTube as soon as I can. So I apologize. I was going to try to have the stream on YouTube this week. Next week, I'm going to try again. I'll try and set it up correct. I'll test it this week. I'd like to have the stream on both. I don't know if my internet could support it, but if not, eventually I'm probably going to be moving over to YouTube full-time for the live streams. We'll see. I may still stream on here occasionally, but it'll be you know, it'll be interesting. And you know, I would argue that you know, paying, you know, if you're paying 10 NL, paying 4 buy-ins, even if you're you know, playing more than that, even if you're playing 5 NL, you know, 1 or 2 lessons that makes you a better poker player is going to benefit you in the long run. So, I mean, to me, getting coaching is something that I think is worth it, especially from someone who clearly can explain their thoughts as well as Chris can, who's a Fender. So, you know, you guys want to take him up on that, go ahead, shoot me a message, or I forget exactly what he said his contact info was. I know he's on Deuces Cracked, so you can contact him on Deuces Cracked, or just let me know and I'll hit him up. Just make sure you let him know, you know, you came. If you guys, you know, contact him, just let him know, like, hey, you know, Eric sent me, or Unexceptional Rounder sent me, or whatever. So let him know, and he'll hook you guys up. So I hope you guys had you know, enjoyed the show. A little bit different format. I'm planning on doing this again sometime. So give me some feedback on the YouTube video, and I hope to see you guys here next week. This is Unexceptional Rounder. You guys keep on grinding.